Well, hello and welcome. This is going to be the first video in what at this point appears to be an 8-video series on the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, with a little bit about absolutism mixed in the middle to provide some context for the move towards enlightened thinking. So in this first video, we're going to focus on the beginning of the scientific revolution, talk a little bit about what was changing and what happened to take people from what we would think of as a non-scientific way of thinking about things to beginning to actually move towards more objective scientific thought. So with that, we'll get started. All right, so scientific revolution. And again, what we're going to be focusing on today is what I've identified as the roots of modern science. And so first, it's kind of almost hard for us to really even think in a non-scientific way, even if you don't think of yourself as a scientist or even particularly objective. Chances are all of us think about things much more objectively and scientifically than would have been true for basically everyone prior to around 1500. If you basically use that as a starting point and work backwards, what people understood about the world at really any point in time, going back a couple thousand years, was basically either what some people from ancient Greece or ancient Rome thought about things. In particular, Aristotle from Greece is somebody that for many centuries was viewed as the authority on why things were the way they were. As you get into the age of Christianity, then the Bible and what the church said about the Bible became authorities about the natural world and an explanation for why things were the way they were. So as you approached the year 1500, basically if Aristotle said it and or the church said it, then that meant it was true. And people didn't really question that prior to getting into the 1500s. If they said it, then it was true. Now, a good example to show something that was believed for a long time to be true through and through, that would be one of the early things during this scientific revolution period to be proven to be actually inaccurate, was something called the geocentric theory, something that Aristotle suggested to be true, something that the Catholic Church suggested to be true, was that the Earth was at the center of the universe and everything revolved around it. And if you take a step back and just try to think through the logic of that, if you think about our experience as humans on this Earth, does it feel like we're moving? And of course, the answer is no. We feel like we're sitting still. And then if you look up into the sky and you notice things like the sun, you notice things like the moon and the stars, does it seem like they're moving around or does it seem like we're moving around? And it certainly seems like if you just think about the course of a normal day, the sun comes up in the east, the sun sets in the west, the moon comes up and the stars come out and then they go away. If anything is changing or moving, it seems like everything's moving around us. So it's certainly pretty logical to support and believe the idea that we were somehow at the center of everything and quite possibly stationary and everything moved around us. Of course, with greater scientific thought, we will come to understand that not to be accurate. I'll speak a little more on that here in just a minute. So, examples such as the geocentric theory ending up being proven wrong, among other things, become a part of what we overall refer to as the scientific revolution. And basically what it comes down to is getting into the 1500s and moving forward, a lot more of the conclusions that were reached about everything were based much more on observation and questioning than had been true prior to that time. Again, prior to this scientific revolution period, basically people took at face value what either Aristotle had said or what the church said. And so again, when I said earlier that I think all of us are pretty scientific minded, probably much more so than we might think or realize, is that we pretty naturally go through our daily lives and make decisions about things based on observations and asking questions that or at least I'd like to think, that there's a decent amount of thinking and questioning and observation that goes on and how we reach our decisions, probably without an awful lot of thought. Now, as far as what was special about the 1500s, for this being the time period of the scientific revolution to emerge, it wasn't that people all of a sudden got smarter. It was really a product of an earlier topic, the Renaissance and the Renaissance period, and one of those characteristics being beginning to ask questions and not just accept things as true that people had often accepted as true over the years. And some things that fed into really sparking more questions, in some cases helping to provide answers, in other cases sparking more questions, was that in Europe they started to gain a lot more access to information that hadn't really been available for a long time. Translations and unread manuscripts. If you look through the era of the Roman Empire, in the area of Europe in particular, the Roman Empire really fizzled out in the late 400s, and then for the next 1,000 years or so, there wasn't a whole lot of dramatic activity going on other than just day in, day out living for people. But one thing that did continue on for nearly 1,000 years was the eastern portion of what had originally been the Roman Empire that evolved into the Byzantine Empire. A lot of information that had been around in Europe left for the eastern part of the Roman Empire, and the Byzantine Empire would fizzle out just prior to this scientific revolution period. And one of the things that would start to return in some cases was information that had maybe been taken to Constantinople, for example. And as Constantinople came under fire from the Ottoman Empire, people who could fled and in many cases returned back to Europe and brought with them materials. And so information that had been lost, in essence, to Europeans was found again. And so that provided some insights, if nothing else, to spark questions and curiosity. Also, with greater contacts with the East, there were definitely some things that had developed in the eastern part of the world. So think Middle East, think Asia, that wasn't present in Europe. And as some of that information flowed into Europe, that also helped spark on, if nothing else, questions about, wow, is what we think is true actually true? And then when you add in things like exploration, coming into contact with new things, seeing things that hadn't been seen before. You know, for example, think about the Columbian Exchange and the fact that there were a lot of goods and whether it was animals or plants or whatever it was that people encountered that they'd never seen before, really shattered the idea that they knew everything and that they understood everything. They realized that there was a lot that they didn't understand. And then especially you add in the printing press. So as people have questions or as people make new observations, the ability to circulate those questions, to circulate those observations, to circulate those new insights was available in a way that just hadn't been true before. So the 1500s really represented a time where a lot of different things all came together at the same time to really create an opportunity for people to think a little differently about the world that they were living in. And one of the things that would definitely prove to be true pretty early on in this process is that a lot of the things that they thought were true and believed to be true were proving to not be true. And it's almost like every idea that they thought they understood, that they found to be misunderstood, just spurred them on even more to think, well, gosh, if we thought that was one way and we now understand it to be different, what else do we think is true and really isn't? And of course, I think today, if you look at where we're at today, we probably think here in the year 2020 that we know and understand just about all there is to know and understand. And it would stand to reason that if we fast forwarded 100 years or 500 years, that the people at that time would look back on us here in 2020 and go, man, what were they thinking? That was so strange that they believed that to be true. So who knows what those things are right now, but it stands to reason that something would be like that. Now, the last thing I want to speak to just for a minute is to kind of touch back with that geocentric theory idea, a belief about the Earth's location in the universe that was proven to be untrue. Nicholas Copernicus will be a significant figure in helping to better understand the Earth's location within our solar system, and at least to do so more accurately. So he's noted for coming up with what was called the heliocentric theory, which means sun-centered theory. And through observation of the motion of planets and and such over a period of time, he was able to essentially conclude that it wasn't the Earth that everything was moving around, but actually it was the sun. If there was an object that was at the center of anything, it was the sun. And now he theorized that the planets and the stars and the Earth, everything moved around the sun in a circular fashion, which will not be altogether accurate, but at least in concept, he was right on. And so just an example of what you get with scientific thought and development of new information. A lot of times what one person begins work on and maybe makes progress on is built on by somebody else. And so with this heliocentric theory, we see an example of that with Johannes Kepler, who simply built on what Copernicus had talked about. Basically, he added mathematics to the theory and was able to not only prove that Copernicus was in fact correct, but get even more accurate with the understanding and say that the motion was elliptical as opposed to circular. Now that's where we're going to go ahead and leave things for today. So hopefully you found this video helpful and informative. Hopefully you'll tune in for the second video in the series where we simply go into a little bit more depth with some examples of new scientific thinkers during this scientific revolution period. All right, thanks for watching.